Across Wales, people are already building a better future in their businesses, their communities, and everyday life. GreenWales brings those stories to life. Wales Future First brings in the voices shaping what comes next, because the future of Wales isn't something far away, it's something we're building right now together. Today I'm joined by Dr Anthony Caravaggi, a conservation biologist and ecologist working out of the University of South Wales. Someone who spends his time understanding how species and ecosystems actually function and what that means for how we protect nature in the real world. Welcome, Anthony. How are you?
Hi, Gareth. I'm pretty good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure to have you here, and it's going to be great to have your sort of vision and aspects of how we are doing in Wales and how things are going. So we may as well get started and get to it.
Yeah, let's go.
When you think about Wales 20 to 30 years, what does a good future actually look like?
I think a good future for Wales actually looks like what I would hope a good future would look like for everywhere, really. Which is where we replace consumerism, immediacy, and reactivity with a focus on well-being. Be that personal individual well-being, community well-being, the well-being of nature, our ecosystems, our environment. Basically that kind of holistic thinking rather than a very self-centered or company-centered mindset.
It's like buying people's things all the time, isn't it? Instead of that, like see that consumer overconsumption. People are going, I need something new, or things are built to fail. You buy something.
And I don't think it's a dichotomy, because not to be hypocritical, I buy stuff, right? I'm a huge nerd. I buy stuff, but you can have that aspect without sacrificing the want for people to do well, for communities to exist and to be cohesive, and for nature to become part of our lives again, instead of this kind of separation that we increasingly have.
It's like a symbiosis, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where you buy a product, it gives something back to something, whether that's biodiversity, whether that's natural stocks, whether that's material, whether it's a natural process being allowed to continue to happen.
Yeah.
Where all we've done is extract, isn't it, at the moment?
It is. I think there's and I'm putting this on a personal. In a personal context at the moment because of what I'm doing at home. But I've got a delivery of hedges coming today, so I'm sacrificing that to be here.
Thank you.
And I'm basically I'm doing a lot of work on the garden, aiming to make it wildlife friendly, biodiverse, also accessible for family, obviously. But, and if we look at the way gardens have gone historically, it's always been towards paving, towards currently AstroTurf. If anyone listening to this has AstroTurf, please replace it. It's horrendous. But that's like everything in a microcosm, right? It's stripping out the natural, it's stripping out the things that take effort, that take time, that take care, and putting in these quick fixes for immediate satisfaction.
And even when they're done properly, I've got neighbours who've got moles who've come underneath. It's all been compacted, it's all been done properly, but the moles don't care about that.
Oh, no.
All around the edges, the weeds are coming through, and you can't really treat it with anything hardcore because you'll damage the fake grass you've got. It's a runoff for water.
Yep.
There's no biodiversity, and they probably hate my garden because the back of mine is the top of the back is full of dandelions, and I was watching. What's the bird that loves the seeds out of a dandelion?
So you're thinking of goldfinch.
Goldfinch, they love it.
I didn't know they love dandelion
Yes,
seeds.
they do.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I've got a video on my phone. I'll show you in a bit. But for me, I love the dandelions because of what they do for the bees at the beginning of the season and all the pollinators. And then in my middle part, and I've got a terrace garden, I've got yellow rattle. And I've been trying to get that to take in. So I've adjusted my mowing. So I do one cut a year, take everything off, and then hopefully by doing that, I spread the seeds. The yellow rattle naturally kills grass and creates meadow-like conditions, which means I don't have to mow, I don't have to do anything, and actually I end up with a beautiful garden with doing very little other than cutting it once a year. So when people go, there's so much maintenance involved, I'm like, there's not, there's just management.
And I think within that, to stick with the garden metaphor.
Yes.
So I'm same with you. From what you're saying there, there's with me, everything I'm putting into the garden is native.
Yeah.
All of it. And I was having this conversation with my daughter yesterday. And so she's like, why are plants from other places not good. So I was talking about like competition and resources and all that. And it's not a case that plants from elsewhere are bad
No.
inherently. Although Budley is my nemesis, it's that to have functional systems, we need things which are complementary, which aren't going to overwhelm and denude and all that stuff.
They all have a role to play at different
Yeah.
types of season, where you have, again, Himalayan balsam. Where does it belong? Sort of in the name.
Yeah.
And it has natural cycles there where it's kept in check and kept in control. They don't exist here.
Yeah.
And then we end up with it out of control. Japanese knotweed, again, where it comes from, where it is, there's natural cycles to control it. We don't have them here.
Exactly. And that all comes back to that sense of well-being. It's the same for people and communities. That connectedness, those interrelationships. Human communities can definitely bring in people from the outside. People from the outside are a valuable source of variety of information and all that stuff.
Right, that's great. And this leads me naturally on to the next question. And it's kind of being given to a certain extent. What responsibility does your role carry in protecting that future?
So I am very privileged in my role in that I get to research the natural environment and hopefully feed into policy and teach future generations of like nature professionals. And I genuinely think that's a huge responsibility and privilege.
So within the role you've just described in a sort of a high level what it is then, so what do you actually what journey do you take the students through? What sort of policy, etc., are you then hopefully influencing Wales for the decisions that we're trying to make for the future generations?
So with students, what we focus on are things that I think are much needed now anyway. More so now in fast news, fast social media, bots, and so on, is critical thinking, actual, practical, applicable skills. And a lot of the skills they get from us, obviously, are not just about nature and wildlife. They can take those into other careers after they graduate, because not everyone who studies ecology is going to become an ecologist. So our journey with the students is all about kind of making sure that they're informed about contemporary issues, contemporary topics, and giving them these critical thinking, critical problem solving, and applicable skills.
So could I ask then, if I said what happens in year 1, what happens in year 2, and what happens in year 3, what sort of journey are they going through?
So year 1 is all about the underlying theory. Kind of what is conservation, what is ecology, what are the issues that are coming out at the moment, and kind of embedding them with these practical field skills. So if they become field ecologists or go into further study, they can do that. Year 2 is more applied. So they take the theory from year 1, and in year 2 it goes into greater detail on the theory, yes, but also brings in how this works in real life. So the theory of conservation, for example, they bring in the applied conservation management aspects, how you take that theory, put it into practice, and the kind of things you need to consider with that, the legal aspects, the social framings. So it's not just about, our course isn't just about animals, it is about people as well, because you cannot separate the people from the nature. And then the third year is effectively specialisms, right? So they got their research project, but we tie in kind of very contemporary needs, like conservation technology. We take the conservation theory stuff, and I'm sticking with that as a thread, and we take that into what is conservation going to look like down the road? What are the emerging threats, the emerging challenges that these students will face and have to address?
So you talked a little bit about policy and research. We've had conversations about this before. So what sort of things do you do with that side of things? What sort of policy, what sort of research are you feeding from and into?
For the students, the policy is all about the necessary, right? The Wildlife and Countryside Act, and making them aware of the Regenerations Act and so on. For myself, so I research broadly wildlife populations. My research has gone from raptorial birds to sharks in South Africa. So I've covered a wide remit, but primarily, particularly in Wales, what I'm interested in is addressing knowledge gaps and finding ways in which I can feed my research into like future decision making. So we're working on a paper at the moment on bird communities in different forest types to look at trade-offs and changes there. We're looking at grey partridge policy associated with agricultural landscapes. The species has declined. It's not just about the species, it's about landscape change and all that sort of thing. So everything I do, ultimately, the aim is to feed into some kind of decision making aimed at improving the situation for species, biodiversity, and ultimately people.
So it leads me beautifully on to the next one. So where are we still reacting instead of preventing?
So first of all, I think it's important to note that reactionary behavior is inherent in us, right? It's an evolutionary trait. You react, you learn, you move on, that sort of thing. It's survival. Where it falls apart, of course, is when we have such pressing immediate challenges that require long-term planning and thinking ahead, not thinking if I bring in politics for a moment, not thinking what can I do to get myself re-elected in 4 years, but what can I do that will benefit us in 20 years? I'm out of the picture, but I don't matter. My party doesn't matter. What matters for the people, for the environment, ultimately for the planet, right? So that's ultimately where it falls apart. Reactionary thinking has a limited lifespan, and the extent of the challenges we're facing at the moment are so severe, so pressing, and so imminent that we do not have the time scale to be reactionary. I don't know, have you heard of extinction debt?
No, tell me more.
So the extinction debt is when a species is functionally extinct in the wild, but isn't actually extinct. There are a few individuals left, like the northern white rhino. There were 2 of them left for a very long time. Functionally extinct, but actually extinct for a very long time. Okay?
And that means no breeding pairs. The population's not going to recover.
No, exactly. Yeah. So 2 individuals, you're not going to get a sustainable northern white rhino population from that, even if it's a male and a female. The genetic impacts in breeding just not viable. And the white rhino conservation is heavily reactionary. Now, I'm not saying people didn't see it coming and they weren't wondering how to save the species, rhino horn bans and all that stuff, right? I'm by no means throwing people under the proverbial bus. What I am saying is that if we think of ourselves or our society or our ecosystems as the white rhino, we cannot allow it to get to 2 individuals left. We have to put ourselves back when there were, I don't know, 1,000, 5,000, whatever. When there were sufficient white rhino for us to look and go, okay, there's something on the horizon. We need to address it now. And honestly, I think we're past that part. I think we're well past that threshold. But that doesn't mean you stop. Being past that threshold doesn't go, oh, well, it's too late.
It's adaptation, isn't it? Where you go,
Yeah.
if you don't, there was something called a Great Emergency Briefing happening this week. I went to a People Planet Pint, and it was hard. You know, it was a 50-minute documentary. Chris Packham it was amazing, but it was really hard to watch. And they said if we don't act, even if we act really hard, really fast right now, we're still probably going to get 1.5 degrees of warming, which is still going to have a big impact on how we live. Yeah. But if we don't do anything, it can be 4 degrees of warming, and that means we go extinct.
Exactly.
So it's you know, we're going to have impact. We are reacting as a world and as a population, but we need to react far harder and far quicker in order to stop the worst from happening to our future generation.
Yeah. And I honestly think now I do put an onus on individual responsibility, right? Yes, we should all do our part. We should recycle. We should reduce consumerism. But I honestly think that there needs to be a greater responsibility from people who are elected to lead. It's like I said just now with the long-term thinking. It's not about if I increase tax on businesses or enforce green infrastructure, and I'm going to extremes, but you're with me. If I do these things, I will become unpopular. I will not get elected next time. Okay? Doesn't matter. What matters is down the line, will those taxes have benefits? Will that money go into improving well-being?
And I will say a little caveat, we aren't very political on this show for a reason. We try to be politically neutral, and we are still being politically neutral. But if you make good decisions for the long term now as a political party, you will reap the benefits.
Yeah, and it is inherently neutral politically. What I'm not talking left-wing, right-wing, or centrist. I'm talking generally. Any party can make that decision to say, this is happening. The scientific consensus is this is happening. These are the distributed impacts it's having on wildlife, on nature, on our society, on individuals in the society, particularly the vulnerable.
And I think there's a stat that's going to things is either 83 or 85% of the population in the UK are very eager for us to step up our action on climate. So
Yes.
actually the general population is with it already. So what's a long-term trade-off we're not being honest about?
So I think a long-term trade-off we're not being honest about is one that we acknowledge, but we aren't effectively being honest about it because we're not making the trade-off. And that is the trade-off between sustainability and overconsumption. Okay, everyone's aware of it. Yes, we recycle, and yes, we should buy less, and all that stuff, and the things I've mentioned previously. But it's an actual thing we need to do. You know, so that in a nutshell, that's my answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. And when you talk about that, just to open the scope out for the audience at home, it's like less beef. Eating less beef. So your dietary change.
Yes.
Not going to the shops every single weekend and buying things, then returning them. When you recycle, recycling is in some ways it's the worst option we have because you're still consuming and it's the product you're buying. And something I've been trying to do this year is be careful with what I'm buying, so it doesn't come in the soft plastics.
Yes.
It comes so that my fruit is just fruit, and I put it in my own little cotton bag and I take it home because I'm not adding waste to the waste streams and the recycling, because recycling rates vary throughout the world, how much is actually recycled. And with soft plastics, the real way to recycle it is to bury it into materials like composite plastic, and then you make your park benches out of it. Fantastic, but actually the better way is to just avoid that material altogether. And again, with clothing, etc., is to buy organic t-shirts, organic trousers, etc. So you're not putting plastics from your clothes into the wash machine. That then goes into the waterways, microplastics, and then gets into and then just feeds the problem. And I think the thing that I've done is start to buy. I say high end. I just don't go out every weekend like I used to when I was a bit younger, going out to be like, I need to buy a t-shirt this week. I'm going to buy a jumper. Now it's either Vinted, which is a fantastic source for buying secondhand. Everything I'm wearing today is Vinted. But there's no issue with that because it's all really good, high quality stuff. And then when I do go to buy things, I try and buy things as sustainable as possible, which are high quality. And actually, I get more enjoyment out of it because it's going to last me 5 years. And I'm buying something so instead of buying a little bottle of water, which is 60p, but I throw it straight in the bin, I bought myself a circular bottle which stops ocean plastics going, etc.
Don't get me started on commodification of water.
Okay, we're not going to do that.
No.
Did you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I would add that this trade-off, we're talking about it, the examples you just gave in an individual sense, but it is a multi-level thing. The trade-offs between sustainability and overconsumption, yes, there's the individual contribution, but again, it's like companies, it's individual businesses, it's councils, and so on. And I think a lot of it, not necessarily starts, but communication is a big part of it. So recently, just out of curiosity, you're talking about variable recycling rates. And I was curious about the recycling rates for my own constituency. So I looked into it, and it is incredibly hard to find any kind of consistent thread, not even just, not necessarily data on how much is recycled, but where it's recycled, how it's processed. Like, part of what we need to do is to be transparent, to make all this upfront accessible.
And this is where supply chains are vital.
Yes.
Because as you say, the collection of recycling is a really good stat. And how much they collect is a fantastic stat. But where does it go? How is it recycled? What is it put into? What material is reused? What material is burnt? For energy instead, and that's the next step. And you're saying big companies and what they're buying power. And I've said this a couple of times on the show, like scope 3 is what we call every emission that's caused by up and downstream of the supply chain. It's the hardest one to control because it's out of the company's control. But councils, the NHS now are starting to say, if you want to work with us, we need your carbon footprint, because they now are having to measure their scope 3, and it will happen. It just needs to happen at a faster rate. The thing that I do privately is teach micro businesses and SMEs how to be in front straight away.
Nice.
So instead of a big company coming in like, I can give you all of the things that you need and don't worry about my emissions, I'm going, well, if you do one product really well, it could be exactly the same product, but because your supply chain is shorter and your emissions are lower, you're going to be better for these bigger companies to work with, which means you're going to then prosper and the area around you is going to prosper as well. So the next question is, and this probably is a nice one to talk about your sort of work that you do. So where does long-term thinking break down in practice, and what does that look like on the ground?
So long-term thinking breaks down in practice when long-term plans are confronted by immediate needs and demands, right? So if we look at upland moorland regeneration, it's not something you can simply say, we're going to focus on regeneration and then do it over like 50, 80 years or whatever. You've got to consider finances, you've got to consider competing interests like wind farms and all that sort of thing. On the ground, what it looks like is getting communities involved, is starting communications with stakeholders, is effectively making connections not just with professionals and skilled people, but like anyone with an interest, with buy-in, which is effectively what stakeholder means, to that concern. So at USW, for example, to keep it very local, we use our grounds a lot as wildflower meadows and areas for sampling and study for long-term data collection. And we also have ties with Banau Brycheiniog National Park, where we've had a lot of meetings. We've started doing work on curlews and upland conservation initiatives, water catchment studies, that sort of thing. So yeah.
And I'm right in saying that'd be the students then? You're getting the students involved in those projects?
Yes, yeah. So the curlew one, for example, is something we're trying to develop at the moment. Very hard species to study, but highly threatened. We had a student trying to establish nesting success over several areas. The water catchment, there was a PhD student looking at kind of water quality associated invertebrates and all that sort of thing. And we aim to get students involved in our work as much as possible. So if I'm monitoring nesting boxes in an oak woodland, I'm going to get the students to do that through the season, not just because it gives them practical skills, but because it gets them involved.
And you know what's beautiful is when I worked at Swansea University, and Ben Sampson, the biodiversity officer, there, big shout out to him, he's amazing in the work that he's doing, but the exposure you give to students by doing things practically and with projects that are actually functioning. So at the end of that then, and there is a big uplift in jobs in surveying and ecologists, there is a big uplift because of biodiversity net gain and all these other things are now becoming important, social value and measuring things. But if you expose them to these projects like Banau Brycheiniog, I know there's Crumlin Burrows in Swansea, which is in partnership with NRW and a couple of other, probably many stakeholders, Ben would tell me, like local nature partnership schemes. But it widens their network and then increases their employability for after they come out and they've already got their connections already.
It does. And to be honest, that's kind of a fight that we're always having, in that in higher education, like higher education's been commodified as well. Students are no longer seen as students, they're seen as customers, paying customers, which changes the way that universities think about them. And as part of the commodification, they're always looking to cut costs. We're well aware of the issues that are facing higher education at the moment, which I'm not going to go into. But what it does mean is that for my field, universities all over the place are trying to cut fieldwork. And the practical application of skill, the practical acquisition of knowledge from being in a place, doing the thing, physically actually being involved, whether that's ecology, engineering, computing, whatever, but it's irreplaceable.
And do you think, have you guys been able to change how you do field work? 'Cause I know we've had a discussion, you used to do quite a lot of work in Africa, and now you're looking at more local partnerships. Is that a positive then for coming out of those constraints? So you're kind of looking a bit more local, but then having no, I wouldn't say a more genuine impact, because it's of course genuine impact out there as well with what you're doing, and amazing work. Excuse me. But now you're more central in Wales with what you're doing. Are you finding there's different opportunities for you?
Yes, so I think we've always wanted to have greater presence across South Wales. We're a Welsh university. Most of us are from Wales. I don't sound like it most of the time, but I'm from the Upper Valleys. And we wanted to have those integrations. Banau Brycheiniog we've had for a long time. But something we've started doing in recent years, particularly and we've been supported in this in a way by the university's pivot towards teaching and research, where historically it was just teaching, is we've been able to go out and make these additional connections. You know, we don't go places just, I say just, air quotes, for field work anymore. We go out to collect long-term data, to feed these data back to the people that we work with.
And that's very much more of a collaborative partnership then, isn't it? Because you're not just going in and being like, these students need some exposure to a project this year, and then next year it's a different project, it's a one and done. Now it's, because obviously, as you say, surveying long-term, that's how you get your actual stats and your impacts and your outcomes. You're actually building those relationships. If you've got a new partnership coming through, that partnership and collaboration will happen for hopefully decades.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hopefully long-termism.
Ooh, well, we could call it long-term via the Future Generations Act. Beautiful. And collaboration. So if Wales fully embodied the spirit of the Future Generations Act, what would feel different day to day?
I think from my perspective, I think definitely a more kind of equitable distribution of funds would lead to a greater appreciation for the natural world, greater connection between people and nature, like you see with these community groups. But if I'm going to be kind of idealistic, then yeah, we'd have more biodiversity around us again. We'd have, rather than monocultured forests, we'd have our deciduous forests back. And I know NRW have changed their forestry policy, absolutely. But this is what I want, so it's my world. I want to have bugs on windshields again. The decline in insects is alarming. I want to have our siskins, our blue tits, our pied flycatchers nesting in our woodlands. I want to have tawny owls. I want to have our small mammals going about with impunity, right? Badgers and foxes, and that's what I want. Is I want a and it's easy to listen to that and kind of be all tree huggy, you know. But that is what I want. And all of that has within it that supportive, empathetic, and supported local communities.
Yeah, and you know what I hear from that, and this is probably because I'm not what you are as an ecologist and conservationist, is that weaving of nature through our economy, through our streets, whether that's tree canopies, our connection to woodlands, our connection to green space. I think we all saw the value of that during COVID, and that I think woke a lot of people up. A lot of the interviews I'm doing all sort of half-birthed from their experience of COVID, being in a green space, not going to an office environment every day, showing the appreciation, blood pressure levels dropping, and just their well-being. And when we say well-being, happiness, people being happy, people appreciating what they've got. And what I hope to see, if is in like a crossroads where we are, people are cycling a little bit more, people are in the green space and connected a lot more. And even in my back garden, I've got rid of the back wall. And I sound, again, it sounds posh. There's a farm around me. It's just a little terraced house. But now I look out of my window, my kitchen window, and it goes straight up to the farm, straight to the farm, and just the well-being that gives me personally, you know, and I know that welcomes wildlife in.
But that's something I was actually thinking of touching on, is that as part of all this, there's how when I say supported, the people in nature are supported top down. So if we're looking at building regs, we have our kind of swift boxes, or sparrow terraces, permeable garden borders, so that hedgehogs and seeds and all that can get around the place, right? I was walking through my hometown yesterday, and they were replacing or resurfacing a road. And I was standing there looking at it, thinking, why are we still using impermeable surfaces for our roads? Why are we kind of enhancing runoff and degradation, basically? Why are we not pivoting?
Interesting. I've never thought. Mud roads, no. Back to the old take.
There are reasons, but in terms of compression and impact and all that, yes. But there's been a lot of work done on permeable roads. It's just, in an ideal world, that's what I would like to see.
Okay, right. So that leads me really beautifully on to, if someone watched this conversation in 30 years' time, you've had your ideal, what you hope, if everything was enacted by the Future Generations Act, what you'd see in your sort of area of expertise, what decision would you hope Wales made today? If it's one thing, what decision could they make today that would help achieve the goals of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act?
It would be a decision oriented around improving economic security for individuals. If people are impoverished, if they're stressed, if they're worried, then they make immediate decisions for their own well-being, and they live very, very much within their means. I can say all these things about wanting to see birds and insects and so on, but if people aren't supported, if people don't have the means to effectively allow themselves to make these connections, to make these decisions, to have these options, then we're already starting on the back foot.
Is that reactionary behaviour, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're always having to put food on the table, always having to pay £1,000 a month for your rent, not earning enough money, having your children that you want to have a good life, maybe give them a holiday every year so at least they feel like they have a good life. You haven't got the room then because there's so much pressure on you personally to succeed. And I think this is where, again, we always talk about the climate and what we need to do and nature, but it does really come back to people and their well-being and them being able to get access. And this is what I mentioned Green Space SOS quite a lot in this interview, because they are putting that connection to people. And there's a few people who go down right now and fish down on this area they're doing, but by creating the infrastructure, and Valleys to Coast are the project that run and have got Green Space SOS in, and I'm seeing them in the next month or two, so look out on the YouTube channel, because that's going to be a really good conversation where we're going to see it again, where they are trying to bring people out of poverty, improve their well-being, so they're not reacting constantly. They can not so much pull themselves up, but given the opportunities, given the training, given the inspiration, that they can expect more in life. And that means then you will connect a community together, you will connect natural landscapes together.
I think fundamentally, yeah, absolutely. And people need to be placed in a position of basically being told, look, you don't have to panic. You don't have to panic about next week or your debt or anything like that. And I'm not saying we should all instantly become insanely wealthy. It's not the point. But the point is not being faced in that impoverished position to begin with.
But I think it's, being wealthy, I think is a bit of a con in some ways, because if everybody...
I wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know either. I wish I was. But no, I don't wish I was. I don't wish I was wealthy. I wish I'm just happy and just able to live a life. If I can just have the basics in life and be able to live it and make decisions without being reactive,
Yes.
then I'm happy with that. And I think if Wales can have that for everyone, then great. I think that's the way we should go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if people are supported economically, then you can say to them, look, we want you to do this thing, or we'd like to do this thing in your region.
Can you have a hedgehog hole?
Yeah, is that okay? And they go, why not?
Because they got space for it.
Yeah, they have the capacity to consider the benefits of it, rather than simply saying, no, just leave me alone.
I love it that you've said that as that's your one change, because I thought it was going to be something to do with biodiversity. I just thought because of your field, but actually you're taking a wider lens of all of this and going, well, if I'm going to have all these lovely things, we actually have to look after the people first. And again, it's been quite a stressful couple of years already with things happening.
Some of the things we see with students, some of the perceptions we see with some students coming in are very much aligned with, for want of a better term, people suck and we should have fewer people and we need to focus on nature. And one of the things I'm very, very focused on kind of disavowing is that notion that you can separate people from nature. You cannot. If nothing else, fundamentally, we are not going anywhere.
And also, that's what we've been doing for the last 60 years, is separating people and nature, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. But they're like, we need to protect animals and the ecosystems. Like, yes, but people are part of that.
We are also an animal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That thank you so much. That's been really good. And thank you for all the answers. They've been perfect. So thank you for that. So this is the nice part. Okay. So is there a project organization in your orbit that you think is quietly doing brilliant work that GreenWales should go and see on the grassroots side of the channel?
Okay. So I've been speaking recently with a project up in Monmouthshire called the Grange Project.
Okay.
Basically, this couple, they've bought an old farm and associated land, which was apparently heavily degraded, and they're effectively restoring. They have volunteer groups come in. They've, if I remember rightly, they've got heritage lottery funding. They're associated with Rewilding Britain. They're bringing in contemporary measures like tech and so on. And we're talking to them at the moment. I've got a meeting with them soon to see how we can work with them to collect data to support their initiatives, and also see what this kind of progressive approach looks like on all levels. So invert soil quality, vegetation, social, because there's a heavy social aspect, so we can look at that as well. And the people running the Grange Project seem genuinely really nice, enthusiastic, keen people who want to see change, who want to support change. So I think that would be a good one.
I've done a little bit of research on them already because I've been looking, I'm always scouting around for different projects, and I've reached out to them, and their whole business is set up to embed the Future Generations Act. And I have reached out to them, and I am going to see them on the 23rd of June.
Nice.
So I literally, and it's very close to my birthday, viewer. So I was going to put it on my birthday, and I was like, no, I won't do that. And then I was like, when I booked it, I was like, why didn't I? Because that would have been a fantastic day out. Yeah. I'm going there on the 23rd of June. So I'm literally so excited to go and see them and to see what sort of things they're actually doing.
Yeah.
Right. So everybody that comes on the show, grassroots or studio, gets a little gift. You become part of the GreenWales collective. We don't do memberships here. We do a collective, which is people really who are actually doing what we want in Sustainability, Future Generations Act across Wales. So a little gift from me is we have one of our little badges, ta-da, that I'm going to gift to you.
Amazing.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
No.
I've had a great time.
I hope you have. And if anybody wants to come and study, if anybody wants to reach out to you, how would they get in touch? How would they come and what courses are available? Give us a little plug.
So I am the course leader for BSc Honours Wildlife Ecology and Conservation, University of South Wales, based in Treforest. We also have an associated Masters, Wildlife and Conservation Management. Both have very, very heavy applied field elements, which are much needed at the moment. If people want to get in touch with me, they can email me, anthony.caravaggi@southwales.ac.uk. I'm always happy to chat. Always happy for people to get in touch. I'm not on the socials, unfortunately.
Thank you. This is Wales, building a better future together. Big thanks to Vango, Powering Stable Productions, for making this possible. You're watching GreenWales, Wales Future First. If you believe in the future of Wales, support it. Like, comment and subscribe.